to reduce stress. So the 6 remedies that I chose are going to be herbal drinks. And I chose these because I wanted to have an alternative in the evenings for people to, instead of grabbing a cocktail, maybe to grab an herbal remedy, because cocktails tend to be depressants. So I wanted to kind of share 6 drinks that might be an alternative in the evenings to drink. So these are pretty fun, and I wish I could share all these with you because they taste really delicious, but I'll have the recipes for you. And don't worry about writing it all down because I can get you the recipes. So you can just enjoy the slides. All right, what is stress? There's daily mild stress, irritating commute, uncomfortable living situation, and there's long-term severe stress, sickness in the family, chronic illness, stuff like that. And then there's short-term severe stress, public speaking, job interview. Those are just some examples of stress. And there's a response called the fight or flight response when it comes to stress. And our body does some really interesting stuff when we are under stress. One of the things is we have shortness of breath, our blood pressure increases, our body starts pumping oxygen and blood to our muscles, our pupils dilate, and everything else tends to shut off, our digestion, our growth, reproduction, immune response. So when somebody's under kind of some chronic stress, you'll see a lot of these. You'll start feeling, that anxiety, you're breathing faster, tighter chest constantly, high blood pressure, which can lead to, heart attacks, hardened arteries. So for many people, the fight or flight, instead of like our ancient ancestors, this is a positive response. So that way we can, interact with our environment, whether that's run away from an animal or attack. But nowadays we have so many of these pressures that we feel a lot of these are starting to contribute to health problems. And so in today's class, we're going to talk about a couple of different categories of herbs. We're going to talk about some adaptogens that can help out, as well as nervine herbs that can help with some of these stress relievers. And under chronic stress, we tend to find that some of these things here can affect long-term. So our immune system is weaker. Again, we have high blood pressure, increased risk for our heart attacks. We have higher releases of cortisol, which can help, inhibits sleep deprivation, and we have memory issues. So stress can really have long-term effects on our health. So I'm going to go back and see if I need to add anybody. Angie, how do you check to see if I need to add anybody? Does it pop up on my screen?
At the bottom of the screen, you'll see the participants. And if you just expand that, you'll see if there's anybody in the waiting room.
Okay, I don't think I have anybody then. Doesn't look like it. Okay. All right, so we're going to start with our first drink, and it's called, we named it the Adaptogen Cocoa. And I'm going to talk about the key players in this drink. Ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is one of my very favorite herbs. So actually, let me go back to adaptogen. So adaptogens are a classification of herbs. This term was coined, this term was coined in the 1940s during the Cold War in Russia. This is a classification of plants that helps our body adapt to stress. I'm sorry, somebody just hopped in. Let me add them here. Okay. All right, there we go. Welcome, Martha. All right. So again, adaptogens are a classification of herbs that we've actually found all throughout the world. So basically, America has American ginseng. Russia has eleuthero, which is Siberian ginseng. They also have rhodiola. Rhodiola is an amazing herb. It doesn't taste very good, but back in 3000 BCE, some emperors in China actually sent an expedition up to what was known then as Siberia to look for some of these adaptogen herbs because they're so beneficial. And then down in South America, they have maca root. So we take all these herbs from all over the place and then we've put them into classification. And what these herbs do is they help with adrenal hormones. They balance the hormones and they also help increase stamina. So a lot of the times we see professional athletes taking these. And the main class, when we group these, one of the main categories they have to abide by is you can take them long term. They don't have detrimental side effects, and they're non-poisonous plants. So these are plants that are generally pretty safe for most people. And so they are actually approved to use in the Olympics. They've done a lot of research, and a lot of Olympians and professional athletes use adaptogen due to their stamina benefits. So anyways, the first one I'm going to talk about is ashwagandha. It's great for those who want to avoid adrenal burnout, used in chronic fatigue syndrome, depression, and stress. This is probably one of my very favorites. I once had a teacher tell me that if we could put ashwagandha into our drinking water, we'd all be better off if we drank ashwagandha every day. And then there's eleuthero. This one is very prized in Russia. There's many people that take this there, as well as pretty much most of their professional athletes take eleuthero. It's a long-term stress tonic for environmental stressors and used to increase stamina. Maca is also, it comes from South America. It's one of my favorites as well. It does help manage stress. Again, it's in that adaptogen category and helps stamina. But one of the main things it also helps, it enhances libido and fertility. So you're in that category. That's an amazing adaptogen to use for that as well. And then I included cocoa nibs in this recipe because it has high amounts of magnesium, which again helps reduce anxiety and stress. And then here is the recipe for that one. Pretty simple, kind of make them powdered, and then you can blend it into a smoothie in the morning, or you can put it into your coffee, or just make it into a beverage with milk, which is pretty tasty. So, and again, like I said, I can share all these recipes for you or with you after we're done here. All right, so the next drink we're going to talk about is the nervine relaxants. There's lots of different ones we're going to be talking throughout this presentation, but here's a few that are the key players in this particular drink. Skullcap. It's great for daily mild stress and helps relieve nervous tension and calms the mind. This is one of my very favorite herbs for people that hold tension in their gut. If you are one of those people that you can just kind of feel stress in your gut and your digestion system is always off when you're stressed, this is one of my favorites to use in that sort of situation. Another one is passion flower. It has a depressive effect on the central nervous system, which makes it good for anxiety and restless sleep. I also find this one very beneficial to help calm the mind. So if you're with somebody that just kind of has a mind that's always spinning at night and you can't slow it down, this is one of my favorites. I had a client one time who was a musician, and she was always stimulated before bed because she would always be presenting later into the evening, and then she'd go home afterwards and she'd always like hear ringing and her mind's always going. And passion flower was by far the herb that really was able to settle her down and calm her mind down. But yeah, that one's one of my favorite for an active mind. And then another one in this blend is lavender. There's a constituent in lavender called linalool, which may be responsible for the calming effect to help reduce anxiety and stress. And then this is just a really nice tea to put together. I don't know if any of you are familiar with our sleep tea. These ones are not as much sedating. We have other ingredients in that one, but these ones really just kind of relax the muscles and calm the mind. And it's great just to relax. But if you're taking this, in the evenings before bed, it's a great one to just kind of calm the whole body before sleep. So the way to infuse herbs is typically the dose is 1 tablespoon of herb per 1 cup of water. And then you steep it for about 20 to 30 minutes. A lot of people think teas, you just kind of steep it for a couple of minutes, but that's true for greens and blacks. But when it comes to herbal teas, it needs to be steeped much longer. And you'll want to make sure that you keep the lid on because you don't want those volatile oils to escape. And in this blend, I added a splash of rose water for taste. Rose is, again, it's a relaxant. It's not the super strongest anti-anxiety or relaxant, but it just has such a beautiful flavor to it. It just kind of opens the heart and just has such a beautiful taste to it. So I added that into this tea as well. All right, this next one is Calm Down Chai. Kava is a plant, kava is a plant that we get a lot of questions about in the store. It's a very potent herbal medicine that we use. It's one of my very favorites to use for anxiety attacks. And it's a very strong muscle relaxant. It does have a very kind of bitter, pungent flavor to it. So it kind of surprises people, I think, a lot when they do take kava. Kava is a very ceremonial herb because it does have such profound, relaxing effects. So you'll see it used throughout the world. Now there's kind of these kava bars popping up. But it does make a really great tea. You can also use it in tincture form. It's funny because when you put it on your tongue, mostly in tincture form, but you can find this in tea form if you've brewed it quite strong. But it can tingle the tongue, and that's the that's the muscle relaxing properties. So you'll kind of notice your tongue kind of going a little limp, but it is safe to use if you're driving a car or operating machinery. But it does just really take the edge off if you're super stressed. So this is a really nice beverage to use in the evenings when you just want something to calm down. I have a lot of clients that'll use kava in replacement of alcohol just because it has that kind of same calming effect. It is one that you don't want to take too much for too long. I usually tell my clients a couple of weeks on, a couple of weeks off, just because it can be kind of strong on the liver if you're using it long term. But what I always like to tell people is mix it with some sort of protein because there's a constituent in there called kava lactones. And if you bind it with a protein, it's more beneficial. It's more potent if you're able to mix it with those proteins. But here, it's just kind of I've mixed it with our rooibos chai that we carry, and it just makes for a really nice drink in the evenings. All right. The next blend I'm going to talk about, I called it No More Blues. This is actually a combination of an adaptogen herb as well as a nervine herb. Tulsi is one of the very few leaf plants that is an adaptogen. So most of the adaptogens that we see are roots or mushrooms, but Tulsi, or also known as holy basil, is a plant that is prized in India and the Ayurvedic health system. And they have used this plant for many, many years. And they use it for several different reasons, but today we're going to talk about it as its use as an adaptogen. Again, it helps lower the stress-induced release of adrenal hormones, so it balances those adrenal hormones. And it has a really beautiful flavor. It's not too basely. It's got this kind of sweet, earthy flavor. And there's several different types of Tulsi basil, but overall, we basically use them in the same way. And then lemon balm, also known as Melissa, it is a gentle plant. So I like to use it a lot with the elderly and the children. It's got these volatile oils in it. So you always want to make sure that when you brew this, definitely keep the lid on. But it's used as a mild depressant for anxiety. And this plant, I always like to call it the gladdening herb, because it's something that tends to work pretty quickly on a lot of people. It's just a really nice, quick pick-me-up. And I should go back and talk about a little bit about the adaptogens and the dosage on that. So when you're working with adaptogens, I really recommend taking adaptogens, whether that's in your tea form or tincture form, 2 to 3 times daily for several weeks, if not months. It depends on your stress levels. Again, a lot of these herbs are classified as long-term use. So I find it beneficial for my clients to use it kind of for lengthier times. And then kind of once those hormones are balanced out, then you can kind of start tapering off. And the nervines are the same way. They're all generally pretty safe herbs that you can take long-term. And some of them act a little bit quicker than some of the adaptogens, but like lemon balm, again, is one of my favorites, kind of a quick pick-me-up. All right, this is a kind of a fun, different way to brew herbs. I put it in apple juice. You can also use grape juice. I like to water mine down a little bit, but if you're somebody that likes a little bit sweeter, you can just keep it as straight apple juice. But I heated up the Tulsi and the lemon balm in the pan with the juice, and just heated it up and let it kind of not boiled, but just kind of got warm with the lid on again for 20 to 30 minutes to really get those herbs infused. And then I took this drink and I poured it over ice. And it is really quite delicious, and it's going to be an amazing drink in the summertime as well. But it's just a nice kind of flavorful alternative to, any sort of other cocktail. All right, another drink is an herbal beer alternative. So a lot of people don't realize that hops is actually a relaxing herb. Back when they first started brewing beer with hops, they noticed that it was very relaxing to the consumer. And when beer, I'm trying to think, it was during, I believe, the Middle Ages that they made it a law that if you do brew beer, you have to brew it with hops. And the reason for that is because there was a lot of uprising during that time, and hops is actually a relaxant and sedating. And so they required it to be in beer because it was a beverage that was consumed by a majority of people. And the idea was to relax the population. So it's really interesting history behind hops, but now we carry it through because that's just what, people tend to think of when drinking beer due to the past history. But so kind of interesting, but it is very relaxing on the nervous system. And so it's one that I've included in this herbal beer alternative. It is quite bitter, but a lot of people like that bitterness. Helps with digestion. Another herb I added into this one is catnip. Catnip is a calming herb that's used for all manners of stress. Again, this is one of my very favorite herbs for my kids. It's very calming. I tend to make catnip tea all the time for them before bed. They drink a little bit. So it's a fun one. And this blend, it's nice because you can brew it and then the whole family can kind of share it. So here's the recipe for that one. It's nice. You just kind of brew it like a tea. You kind of let it go to room temperature. Or if you want it right away, you can add some ice to it just to kind of cool that original tea down. And then you add in the sparkling water to it. And if you want to boost the flavor, you can add like some lemon balm honey or a splash of herbal bitters to increase that bitter taste. So that's a fun one to drink. All right, and then the last one we're going to talk about is our stressless fermented soda. This, again, we talked about lavender already. It helps alleviate tension and stress. Lemon balm, due to its sedative volatile oils, it can be used as a mild antidepressant anxiety. Again, we talked about that one a little bit. And then there's linden in this formula. This one is to help calm anxiety and high blood pressure. I'm sure a lot of you have seen linden trees growing around. It's a beautiful plant. It has these delicious smelling flowers. But this one is my very favorite for people that have anxiety that you can feel in your chest. So tight chest, fast heart palpitations. That's where this one comes in handy. It was funny. I was one day at a park and there was a linden tree that was just blooming. It smelled so beautiful. I went out there. I was picking it to make a bunch of tea and tincture out of it. And this guy comes up to me one time. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm using this plant for medicinal." He's like, "What do you use it for?" I was like, "Oh," and I started explaining stress and anxiety. And he's like, "You know what? I had this one Native American lady that came up to me and told me that I really need to be taking linden tea. And I didn't know that you could really use herbs for plants. And I kind of thought she was a little crazy by telling me that. And then here you are using it for the same thing." And I just told him that it's a very beneficial plant and people have been using it for a very long time. And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to go home and grab a bucket and go make some tea myself." So I was super excited about trying it himself. But that's kind of my little story about linden. Also, this plant is called lime tree. So if some of you are familiar with that name. But this is a very fun beverage. I don't know if many of you have fermented very much, but this one is fun. And it only takes, less than a week to make this one. So you take some water and some honey. It's kind of like a mead, basically. You're kind of brewing a mead. A little bit of vinegar in there, and then you add your herbs and some lemon slices. And you'll want to put this in a jar, and then I always like to tell people you keep the lid on, but twice a day you'll want to burp this formula. So you'll just kind of unscrew the cap and kind of let the air out, just because if too much carbonation builds up, your jars can kind kind of explode. So just make sure to burp it. And then after a couple of days, and strain it out with some cheesecloth, and then put it into a tighter fitting lid, just for a couple of days. Again, I suggest burping it in that bottle as well. And then you can refrigerate it and let it sit for even longer. But it is very tasty beverage. If you do let it brew for quite a while, it can have a little bit of alcohol in it, not too much. It's as much as like what you'd find in like kombucha or something like that. But just keep.
Looks like we lost Chrissy for just a second here. Let's see if she comes back on.
She probably put her soda in a cold environment and froze.